Hello, it's time for Combat Patrol Carnage. So we're back with issue 36, we've painted our Havocs, and now it's time for us to look at the new pages of lore. So we start looking at some of the greater weapons of the Legions of the Damned, such as the Daemon Engines, tanks, some of the characters as well that lead the forces. Then we look at the Chaos God Tzeentch. Then we have short story with Bonds of Honor Part 9, returning to Sergeant Askerton. And then that's pretty much it for this video. So there we have it, some nice new bits of lore for us to go through, but before we do, don't forget to do all the usual. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop me a comment down below. Love hearing back from you guys, and it goes a massive way to help this channel out. Finally then, Combat Patrol Carnage is proudly sponsored by warbay.shop, your one-stop supply for all your hobby needs. They stock everything you need from getting started with models and paints, to expanding your gaming equipment and decorating your hobby area as well. So check them out, there's a link to their website, and you can also find them at their store. And who knows, you might find your next hobby project at a bit of a discount. Right, let's head to the table and indulge in some lore about the Chaos Forces. So here we are then, back with issue 36, and we've got our models fully painted. So that means it's on to our lore section. So let's just take a quick look at these guys before we set them off to the side. So we have each of our different heavy weapons. Looking really cool. And of course, our champion, who's also looking rather impressive. So, right, let's adjust the camera and we can dive right on into our new lore articles. So, past our paint guide. And here we have our first page, which is, I believe, a double spreader. So, we've got quite a lot to go through. So, we look at the engines of the damned. A host of demon engines spills out of the Soul Forge to lay waste to the galaxy. Engines of the damned. Demon engines are nightmarish amalgams of flesh and metal. They are animated by warp energies and are among the most feared weapons in any Chaos Space Marine army. Demon engines are colossal machines of war that are imbued with demonic energy. The creation of these monstrosities is a dark secret of the Chaos Space Marines, known only to the Brotherhood of the Warpsmiths. Deep in soul forges in the Immaterium, they use profane rituals to bind screaming demons and force them into the great rune-marked hulls of their infernal machines. These blasphemous creations are then turned loose on the battlefield to unleash unthinkable violence on the foes of the Chaos Space Marines. So agonizing is the torment of the spirits within that they gladly turn their fury on anyone in their path, channeling their malevolence into acts of the utmost brutality. Warpsmiths. Warpsmiths are the infernal artisans who created and maintain the corrupted engines and vehicles in the Chaos Space Marine army. They ply their trade even in the heat of battle and are well equipped to defend themselves. Alongside conventional weapons such as plasma pistols and axes, a Warpsmith is outfitted with a writhing set of semi-sentient mecha tendrils that act like additional arms. They can use these to strike at enemies or rip open the control panels of machines in order to corrupt their code. A Forge Fiend rears up before unleashing gouts of searing ectoplasma from its maw. Forge Fiends. Forge Fiends are gigantic demon constructs that loom menacingly on their hind legs, pouncing and leaping like wild animals. Many have been seen armed with multiple cannons and spewing flesh-melting ectoplasma. But there are also frightening rumors of them using their jaws and claws to bite and rip enemy soldiers into bloody pieces. Their armoured bodies resist enemy fire so well that they often bound straight into the heat of the battle, heedless of any attempt to stop them. Mauler Fiends. Taking the form of a twisted, crouched beast, a Mauler Fiend is driven forward by an unnatural lust for carnage. Capable of traversing the harshest terrain with ease, these mechanical predators will stop at nothing to reach their target. Once in battle, they lash their enemies with steel tendrils, shredding soldiers to ribbons. When facing enemy vehicles, they deploy magma cutters, easily slicing through to the crew within, who are murdered with glee. A Mauler Fiend pounces upon an armoured vehicle and prepares to cut it open. Lord Discordant. A Lord Discordant is a heretic who is obsessed with demon-possessed machines that he takes to battle mounted atop a custom Hellstalker. The Lord Discordant's affinity with the twisted and the demonic runs so deeply that normal machines malfunction and fail in their presence. Where he can, the Lord Discordant siphons the spirit energy of enemy machinery to replenish that of his own, or else to use in vile rituals that spread the impurity of his own creations to the enemy's war machines. Vex Machinator, the Arch Lord Discordant, spreads mechanical anarchy. Venom Crawlers. A Venom Crawler is a repulsive machine that takes the form of a giant scuttling arachnid. It hungers for the dead, whose bodies it rips to pieces, feasting on their souls. Once it has flayed a corpse, the Venom Crawler draws the life essence into its iron belly, but if there are not enough of the slain to sate its appetite, the Venom Crawler goes on the hunt. With its tendrils lashing and excruciator cannons firing, it is not long before the bodies are piled high and the Venom Crawler can gorge itself once more. Driven by hunger and greed, a Venom Crawler pushes to the front of the battle. A Defiler easily passes over a cleft in the ground to break the enemy defenses. Defilers. Defilers are huge arcane machines of death that stomp across the terrain to blast, slice, or smash anyone who dares to get in the way. Raised up on 6 hydraulic legs, these strange engines tower above even the superhuman space marines and can slice them in half, armor and all. They are brutally equipped and can choose to crush enemy soldiers into the dirt, blast them with a cannon shot, rip them apart with wicked pincers, or flay them to their bones with a writhing scourge of tentacles. A group of Helldrakes descend into the fray, unleashing an inferno. Helldrake. A Helldrake is a gigantic demon engine that soars through the skies like a mechanical dragon. Possessed of its own vicious intelligence, the metal beast needs no crew and no direction. It can engage with an enemy aircraft, tackling them mid-air and ripping them to pieces with its claws. It is also capable of swooping down to unfortunate soldiers on the ground beneath, rending and tearing at them before unleashing torrents of searing bale flame, burning them to dust and ashes even as they try to flee. So there we go, some of the many chaos vehicles within the Traitor Legions. So from crudely assembled defilers which house a demon, to more living than machine for creatures such as the Helldrake and the Venom Crawler. Moving on, we take a look at another Chaos God. This time it is a changer of ways, Tzeentch. Tzeentch, one of the great Chaos powers. Tzeentch is known as the changer of ways, the architect of fate, and the weaver of destinies. Tzeentch is the Chaos God of change, and he is known by thousands of different names and titles across the galaxy. His followers depict him as an incomprehensible figure, his burning eyes and a sunken face surmounted by horns, and his skin crawling with mocking faces that repeat his words in chorus. None can truly fathom his plans, nor understand his purpose, save that he delights in manipulating the fates and toying with creation to further his own arcane designs. Often his power spills out from the warp into real space, the resultant rifts marked by psychic explosions and mutagenic power. The cults and demons that follow Tzeentch are many, from whole armies of Chaos Space Marines to tiny groups of cultists on worlds in the far reaches of the galaxy. Their purposes are unfathomable, and only Tzeentch truly knows the method behind the madness, for he sits like a spider in the centre of his web of complex schemes. To look upon the ever-shifting form of Tzeentch, the great conspirator, is to gaze into the depths of madness itself. Lords of Change. A Lord of Change is one of the greatest demons of Tzeentch. Shimmering with magic, they bring the mutable power of Tzeentch to the battlefield, hurling spells and curses from their enchanted staves. Screamers of Tzeentch. Screamers flash through the air, letting out wild screeches. When they sight an enemy, they descend in a flurry of teeth and claws. Heralds of Tzeentch. In armies that follow Tzeentch, weird demons ride levitating discs into battle, from which to chant spells and curses. Mutilaf Vortex Beasts. The Mutilaf Vortex Beast is a huge mutated creature whose body is flooded with the strange power of Tzeentch. So there we go, you dusty old Thousand Sun fans. There is your patron god and some of his key elements to his armies and followers. So yeah, pretty cool. Easily one of my favourite of the Chaos Gods, although some of his units are quite tricky to paint, especially the Brimstone Horrors here. Mutilaf Vortex Beast looks very difficult to actually paint with the swirling vortex on its back there, but looks a really awesome model with the more full of tentacles and stuff. Yeah, pretty cool. And the awesome pink horrors, nicely updated models, all the different disciples, etc. you can take and create. So yeah, there we go. Moving on then, we got the next part of the Bonds of Honor story. So this is part 9. Well done there, my lads. You all kept your heads up and not a snore was heard. I knew you had it in you. I'll pretend that it is not much the excitement of the tale as it is my own brilliance in telling it, and I thank you for the compliment. Now we must get you somewhere to lay your heads down, for tomorrow you'll awaken as aspirants. Your trials are not over, but now you shall be remade. From tomorrow, each thing you suffer is not just to see if you can withstand it. From tomorrow, everything shall make you better and stronger. Now, follow me to the dormitory, and we shall find you each a nice slab to lay down on. If there is one thing I can promise you to keep your spirits up, it is that you shall not be too hot to sleep. And if any of you should feel a sweat forming, do not trouble yourselves. Just take some of the snow that blows in through the bars of your window, and make a nice pillow for yourself. So come along, let's get you to bed. Though I hope I haven't oversold it. Wouldn't want you disappointed now, would I? And let me carry on with your bedtime story. So there they were, back in their gunship. As the explosion of the Eldari ship winked out in the blackness, the Space Marines took a look around the battle going on nearby. It was an impenetrable tangle of different ships as missiles flew between the dueling Chaos Space Marine and Eldari vessels. And as great guns vomited out plasma, biting through the armor plating of the ships, around and amid the largest of the craft flew smaller ships. Some, fighters, disgorging from the bellies of the greater cruisers. Others, small and agile vessels that were capable of long-distance flight, and one of this type, no doubt drawn to see the source of the Eldari ship's explosion, peeled away from the mass and headed straight towards them. Mindful of their greater mission, the squad at first moved away, not running, of course, but trying to keep themselves to themselves. Truth be told, though, they did not try it very hard. The Chaos Space Marines are an ancient enemy. The chapter has had more quarrels with them than it has bolters. Not only us, but our progenitor chapter, the Ultramarines, has fought not just many battles, but many campaigns over many thousands of years, and we have inherited their ancient hatreds just as surely as we have developed our own. Anyway, you will hear more of our traditions before too long. All you need to know for now is that they hated their pursuers more than I can adequately describe, and they were none too sorry to see that they would have to fight them. At the helm of the ship, Askerton wheeled the gunship around, and both the Space Marines and the traitor ship fired in unison as they streaked past each other. Boarding actions. Boarding actions are ferocious fights between boarding parties and the crews and defenders of the void ships that they are breaching. These deadly and bloody fights in the cramped quarters of great ships are brutal, even by the standard of the 41st millennium warfare. Those who take part are lucky to escape with their lives. In return for their bravery, they get the chance to capture powerful enemy vessels, gather vital intelligence, sabotage a warship, or assassinate an important crew member. There was a moment where none of the squad were sure whether they had been hit, for the firing of missiles and the rattling of autocannons is deafening in itself. The craft shakes, the hull groans under the strain, all amid the clanking and the banging of the weapons themselves. It's perfectly possible to take a nasty hit and be none the wiser. But the system showed all clear, and by some miracle, it seemed that the craft had survived. But what of the enemy? If it's hard to know if you've been hit, then it's harder still to know if someone else has been hit. Askerton wheeled around again to make another run, and they saw that they had indeed hit the enemy's ship. A fire burned on its hull. Now, this looked a little strange, for there is no air out there in blackness, and the fire was fueled only by the oxygen escaping from the inside. Can you imagine that? Well, perhaps you'll see it in time. Anyway, the enemy ship was still under full power, and both craft made a run at each other once more. This time there was no mistaking it. Amid the shaking and the crashing of the craft, there was a shake so violent that young Mechtras overbalanced, crashing his armoured fist into the floor as he threw his arm out to steady himself, and punching neatly through the deck plating as he did so. The autocannons grew silent, but the noise intensified, and Sergeant Askerton struggled to hold the craft steady. He brought it under some semblance of control, and then tried to wheel around again, but it did not respond to his command, instead making a limp turn slightly to the side. Askerton barked out a sudden order for the squad to brace themselves for some rough manoeuvres. It is well indeed that they had all donned their helmets in case of decompression, for even meters apart in the din, they would not have heard a word of his orders without the communication systems contained within. The cabin began to fill with smoke, and Askerton steered the craft towards a nearby world, trusting to the fates that the craft would remain whole and not lose power and leave them drifting in the void. There was no help out here, and though a Space Marine's helmet and armor may be void sealed, what is one to do floating all alone with 100,000 miles of nothing in all directions? Luckily, on this occasion, it did not come to that, and with much cursing and fiddling of the controls, the ship was brought to heel and pointed in the correct direction. That ought to have been enough of an unlikely occurrence, but to their amazement, the squad realized that the Chaos Space Marine ship must have suffered much the same fate, and the traitor crew on board had come up with much the same solutions to the problem. Practically alongside them as there was the damaged craft, and a vile and cursed look it had to it too. But now they had a chance to look properly. The Space Marines saw that the strikes on the ship were terminal. The ships hit the atmosphere in tandem, and their hulls began to glow red-hot from the air. But where the Silver Templar gunship withstood the heat, the Chaos Space Marine one did not. First a single panel flew back from the hull, bouncing down the rest of the craft and striking one of the autocannons. Then another. As the hull lost its shape, it grew hotter and began to deform. As it slowed further and further in the atmosphere, it dropped back behind Askerton's ship. The Space Marines had only themselves to consider now, and they secured themselves into the cabin as best they could, strapping themselves hurriedly into the seats. Eventually, the craft slowed enough that the drag on the atmosphere diminished, and the squad braced for a crash landing. There we go, another chapter in Sergeant Askerton's tale. Yeah, we must be coming close to the end now. 9 chapters in, but yeah, I reckon this story could probably run to the end of the magazine. But there's bound to be plenty of other stories besides. Right, up next then, we do have our gaming articles, but that is it for this video. So we'll return to the front cover and we'll bring back in our models for the outro. And there we have it. That was our lore sections for issue 36. And yeah, some nice, interesting lore. Looking at the different Chaos Daemon Engines was really nice. Learning a bit more about the Chaos Gods, this time focusing on Tzeentch. And of course, we had that new short story and chapter for Sergeant Askerton's tale. So they're now heading down to a random planet, and they're in a crash course setting. It'll be interesting to see what happens in part 10. So yeah, looking forward to that. But as I said, that is it for this episode. Up next, as I said, again, we have our gaming articles, and we get to put these guys through their paces in a scenario. So all that's left for me to do then is to say thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on more Combat Patrol Carnage. Goodbye.